Today, Scott Morrison defended himself against the Robodebt Royal Commission's findings, with excuses like the scheme started 12 months after he left the social services portfolio. The coalition government was warned multiple times of its illegality. Robodebt led to suicides and the destruction of livelihoods. How have those directly involved in Robodebt, and really all of those in the coalition, not all resigned in shame?
Dean.
Thank you very much for that, PK. Look, I think the first point is the judicial process has to be gone through. I think everyone would accept that that's a first-order principle in our country, and as outrageous, I think, as many people found the Royal Commission findings and the series of events that were disclosed through that process, the judicial process must be respected. In terms of Mr Morrison's future, that's absolutely for Scott Morrison, but I think it's also for the electors of Cook. And until the electors of Cook start to express their disappointment or their frustration, then I think Mr Morrison will stay in the Parliament. OK,
how do you ascertain that?
Well, I think it's not a part of the world I'm very familiar with, PK. But, parliamentarians are responsive to their electorates. I think in recent years we've seen communities get very, very active about a whole range of issues and make their voices and their concerns known.
So is the Liberal Party monitoring the electorate's reaction to this?
I wouldn't know that. I doubt that, but I wouldn't know that. But it really is a decision for Mr Morrison, and it really is a decision for the electors of Cook. And until the electors of Cook start to say, we're frustrated by this, we're disappointed by this, then I think it's status quo. OK.
Katy, Gallagher, is that satisfactory, that it's ultimately up to voters? What did you make of what Scott Morrison said?
Well, I only read it on the way down here this afternoon because we were in the Senate this afternoon, but I wasn't surprised by it. I have to say, I think a hallmark of Scott Morrison's prime ministership was it was never his fault, it was always somebody else's fault, and I think we saw that in the explanation today. I had nothing to do with it, it was all these other people. There's no doubt Robodebt was a gross failure of public administration. The executive government has responsibility. The public service has been found to be wanting as well. And there's significant change we need to bring about to make sure it never, ever happens again, because people's lives were lost, as you said, families are mourning. And it was this, Robodebt in a way doesn't give you the magnitude of what was happening. The government was trying to take money from people, our community, who didn't owe them money. And, I think, the fact that that was able to happen and to happen for so long is devastating. So there's a lot to learn. We're formulating a response to the Royal Commission, taking it really seriously. It's one of my jobs as Public Service Minister to put a lot of those recommendations, or to look at a lot of those recommendations, but we can never allow it to happen again, ever.
Senator Barbara Pocock, I want to bring you in. Scott Morrison said that ultimately this is unsubstantiated, it's contradicted by clear evidence. What do you make of his defence?
I think it's appalling. We've had a Royal Commission, which we've all paid for. It was very thorough. It went deep. It got people's stories out on the public record. It has told the full story. A very authoritative figure led it, who has the trust of the community. So I think Scott Morrison has really overstepped the mark today in that comment. We have the Royal Commission and its findings. We need to act on them and meet, as Katy said, the grief and the loss and the damage that the Robodebt scandal has caused. And it's really shaken people's confidence.
Should he resign?
In our I believe he should. Well, I think people should take responsibility for such a failure.
Katy Gallagher, do you think he should resign?
Well, he's an elected member of Parliament, so only he can determine that.
No, that's mechanically the way, but do you think he should resign?
Well, I think he should take responsibility for the role he played. And that should have consequences. And what we saw today is, again, someone who's failing to take responsibility and happy to blame others.
OK, and Senator Dean Smith, do you think he's taken responsibility today? What did you make of the way he framed it?
The Robodebt issue, many parliamentarians saw play out for themselves because impacted people called the offices of parliamentarians, as they do, are seeking assistance. So I'm someone who, you know, in a very different way, lived through the Robodebt issues because constituents were coming to my office.
And so would you like Scott Morrison to be held to account?
I think the Australian community is looking for parliamentarians to stand up, to accept responsibility, to take personal responsibility. I absolutely agree with Barbara says the Royal Commission process was very transparent. That's why we have a Royal Commission process, and it just undermines public confidence in our parliamentary system if people keep avoiding taking personal responsibility.
So would you have preferred your former leader to have taken personal responsibility today? And I have a follow-up to that, and you won't be surprised. Does it do the Liberal Party brand damage that he hasn't?
Yes.
How much damage?
I think a lot. I think a lot. You know, the Liberal Party is in a rebuilding phase. Many will regard the last election as decisive in terms of what lessons the community was sending the Liberal Party. We have a lot to do in terms of rebuilding trust between the Liberal Party and the community. Issues like this stand in the way of us being able to rebuild that trust. It's very, very difficult for the Liberal Party to move forward while these issues are unresolved.
And while I understand you say it's ultimately up to him and his, the people in his electorate, what you're really saying is it's really hard for you to rebuild while he's there.
Yes.
How hard? I just want you to give me a sense of it. Luke, you're next.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it's a weird thing to say to someone, if they do something wrong, it should be up to them whether they keep their job or not. I think I should keep my job. I feel like, no, you should lose it. Like in an office, if someone set fire to the facts, you wouldn't say, you can decide whether you keep working or not. Like, you just fire them, right? And I feel like Scott Morrison should just go.
But, PK, it is important to... Whatever people's personal political opinions might be, the Royal Commission is a step in a judicial process, and it is a fundamental feature of our country.
For sure.
That the judicial process must be upheld and it must be respected.
But personal responsibility must be taken.
As well. But, you know, there is a judicial process. The Royal Commission was the first part of that. We've still not seen the sealed section. You know...
Would you like us to see it?
I'm curious to know why it wasn't disclosed, yes.
OK. Jahin, Scott Morrison has obviously defended himself, his own legacy today. Would you like to see him resign?
I think, to put it plain and simple, looking at the situation, the thing that we're not focusing on is the lives that are being lost, that have been lost through this Robodebt. And I think accountability needs to be taken. There were consequences of lives being lost, and I think that is the narrative that we need to focus on and really talk about rather than playing politics here, if I may put it that way. So I think accountability needs to be taken, and consequences do affect people, no matter what level they are at.